My name is Jennifer Conroyd, and I am the founder of a company called Fluid Running. It's a deep water running fitness company.
The intention of these interviews is to remind people that they've been through adversity before. I read your submission and I was very interested. Could you share with us a little bit about the adversity that you overcame? I think it would be really interesting, especially since it was one of the reasons that your product came to life.
So here's I call it my backstory of how fluid running began. So I'm an athlete. I've run about 16 marathons, and I've even completed the Ironman. But in 2010, I was training for what was the most important marathon I had ever done, because all of my siblings were coming in from across the country to Chicago to run it with me as part of a charity team for Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation in honor of my nephew, Ben, who had been diagnosed at a very young age. So my entire family was coming in. I was team captain. We had named ourselves Team 10-10-10 for Ben, because it was the Chicago October 10, 2010 marathon. And 6 weeks before that race, I tore my calf muscle. And it was one of those, when you're an athlete, you know when it's a bad injury. And I heard the little pop and I started hopping and tears. I knew in that moment I was probably going to be out of this race. So I saw my doctor and he said, "Yeah, you can't run, Jennifer." And I was like, "Oh, I'm so determined to run this marathon. There's got to be a way." So I literally just started Googling, how do you stay in running shape when you can't run? And, there's elliptical and different things, but I found a couple articles about aqua jogging or deep water running. And there was this one particular article and it said how to stay in running shape. It was a 9-week plan, how to stay in running shape with an injury. So I looked at the plan and I saw it was 9 weeks. I looked at how long the longest run in the deep water was, and it was maybe an hour. So I ended up emailing the author of this article and I said, "Listen, I wish I could talk to you because I only have 6 weeks and I need to run a marathon. I need to run more than an hour." So he said, "Jennifer, I'll call you tomorrow." And I, ended up, paying him to coach me well. So all I did for the 6 weeks leading up to the Chicago Marathon was run in the water. So for any runners out there, if we miss like 2 days, you start to panic that you're losing your fitness. So I did all my runs, and I share that I even did my 20-miler. And what does that mean? That means running in the deep water, in my case for 3 hours, keeping my heart rate in my heart rate zone for the entire time. So, but anyway, got to the start line with all my siblings, and it was one of those like, oh, so help me God if this works. We'll see what we're going to do with this with our lives. So, as a runner, there's a term that says hitting the wall, and I kept waiting for the wall at 10 miles, because I literally had not run on land in 6 weeks. 20-miler, never hit the wall. Finished the marathon. Now it's interesting. It was a hot day. It was in the 80s, which is very hot for a marathon. And my time, I think I would have been pretty close to my best time ever, honestly, if it weren't for the difference in heat from that day compared to when I did my best time. So at any rate, I crossed the finish line, and it was truly a light bulb moment in my life where I was like, wow, why isn't every athlete doing this? Or I can help so many people with this way to exercise, and my initial thought was, injured athletes, the athlete who's training for, the Ironman or their first Boston Marathon or something, they get injured. And I had never heard anyone talk about this. At this point, I had probably run at least 10 marathons, a whole bunch of triathlons, and I'd never known anyone that said they did deep water running. And it was kind of like one of those, like, why isn't everybody doing this? So like I said, it was my light bulb moment. I emailed my coach as soon as I got home and I said, "I finished the marathon and I want to get certified to teach this. And how do I do that?" And he says, "Jennifer, it's not deep water running. It hasn't taken off in the US. He said, "It's very big in Australia. It's pretty big in Canada. So why don't you look to those countries?" So I got on the internet and I found a certification program in Canada, and I had to go there twice. One was like a foundations of vertical water training or something. And then the second one was like an aqua jogging certification. And then I'm a swimmer as well. So the health club where I swam, I asked if I could start creating a program there. And they said, sure. So I initially started working one-on-one with injured athletes, because that was kind of who I thought was going to be my market. And little by little, people started asking about what I was doing, and people were sharing their success stories. And finally, someone said to me, I wish you could create like a class big enough so several of us could do it. So Again, I asked the park district if I could start a group class, and they said sure. And I started with one class, and it was me. And the class quickly grew from, I think, maybe 8 people were on deck the first day I taught a class, and that class grew to 10 or 15, and then more people wanted to do it. So I started adding classes. The next thing I realized I couldn't teach all these classes myself. And then participants were loving this program so much. And just to give you some context, I say it's kind of like a spin class, but imagine, so it's in the deep water. So rather than being on a bike riding, you're running in the deep water, interval-based sets to music and everything. So then instructors or people started coming up to me and saying, I would love to teach this. And I was saying, boy, I would love to have teachers, but there's no certification in the United States of America. So
if I could cut you off a second. So
yeah.
It's a class or a product? That's the part I missed.
Okay. So
and before you answer that for me, you mentioned a wall, right? So hitting the wall.
It's where you've got no fuel, nothing. You feel like you can't run two more. Your legs turn to lead. Your energy is just completely zapped. And yeah, the term is hitting the wall, where you just feel like you can't run another step. I've been there in races, and it's tough. It's tough. You do your best to just try to keep moving, and it's an awful feeling. But yeah, never had that happen in that race.
Awesome. All right. So tell me, is it a product, a class, or is it
Okay, so I'll jump forward a little bit. So it started as a group class. I ended up certifying a bunch of instructors. We expanded the group class program in the Chicagoland area. But so then people started finding out about it. And I was getting emails from people all over the country, and quite frankly, around the world. I would find usually injured athletes saying, hey, I'd love to be able to do you have this in Miami? Do you have this in LA? Do you, et cetera. I work at a co-working, this is not my office. I actually work at a co-working spot. And one day at one of our kind of group meetings, I was sharing kind of my frustration with trying to grow the group class. That was a big adversity for me. Trying to grow the group class was so much harder than I expected. And I shared it in a group setting at our co-working space. My now partner, Mike, came up to me and he said, hey, Jennifer, have you ever thought of creating this program and putting it into a product for individual use for the consumer? And I thought, I hadn't thought of that. And I said, well, how do we go about doing this? He says, well, we test it, and then if it's successful, we launch it. So we really quickly put together a test where we took the fluid running program and put it into a do-it-yourself program, which included, because I thought, well, how am I going to teach people to do this if I'm not there to teach them live? So we created instructional videos that teach people how to properly do the fluid running form and these other movements that we have. They would then get the gear, the equipment, which would be a flotation belt, Bluetooth waterproof headphones, and then this kind of tether that allows you to tether in place if you want to a lane line, and then audio workouts, interval-based, music-backed, where it's me right now leading all the workouts, and they all start with hello, fluid runners. This is Jennifer. I'm going to be your coach for the next 55 minutes, and people get in the water and start doing the workouts.
I've got another question for you, right?
Yeah.
So you got injured. You're like, I'm not going to give up. I'm going to run this anyway.
Yes.
Now, what that tells me is that you've already got a very strong mindset going into that particular adversity.
I do.
So where do you think that comes from? What have you faced before, or how were you trained in a way that made your mindset be, you know what, there's this mountain and I am climbing it, and I am not hitting the wall, as you put it?
Well, I think for sure, I know for sure, is when I became a single mom with a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, and 4-year-old. And actually, that's really what launched my fitness, athletic life, if you will. It was, not a choice of mine, a very difficult situation, but I remember I said to myself, Jennifer, you need a positive focus. Like you need something to help you get through this. And there was this brochure that was delivered in the mail from the YMCA, and it was a intro to triathlon training course. I said, that's my positive focus. So I signed up for that, and that, I say, was my therapy. I had never really run in my life. It was in my 30s at this point. I had never biked. I swam a couple years in high school and started showing up to this class. And, you know, I talk about how when we'd go from the, you know, we'd have some days where we'd train on the bike at the YMCA. Some days we'd be on the treadmills running side by side in our group class. And then sometimes we'd be in the pool. And I talked about how I would swim and I'd actually like punch the water and I'd have to empty my goggles at the end of every lane to let the tears out. And that was my therapy. And I was determined not to let that very difficult time in my life bring me down. So I would say for sure that was far more adversity than anything else I've faced with my personal life since, or certainly with my business. So that if you can get through that, you can get through anything. So
part of it in a sense was, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you found something where if you put in X, you should get Y out, right? If you put the effort and the energy in, one of the beauties of sports and so on and training and also taking ourselves to the next level, and I think it is why it can be very cathartic and help us deal with adversity, is that we know that if we do the following things, we will get the outcome.
Yeah.
Now, I understand that when you became a single mom, right, that was a tough time for you. And you found an outlet to help you handle that adversity, to help you kind of center yourself as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything before that gave you the mindset that when something bad happens, I need to shift my focus? So one thing you said is, I realized that I needed to shift my focus, which is very, very important in terms of mindset and getting where we want to be. That is very important. But do you think there was something further back that taught you that when things get tough, you change focus? And it can be something, a silly life experience in a sense. Sometimes we don't realize, but can you try for me?
Yeah, I'm going to try to think of something particular. I mean, it's funny when you started saying, where did that strength come from? You saw me kind of smile because I thought, well, that was my dad for sure, where I think a lot of my strength came from. And then certainly in the situation when I became a single mom and with so many things, but we were raised, there was no whining in my house. You know, we were much like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And I always would share this story about one of my favorite dad stories. God bless him, God rest his soul. But when we were I was one of 5 siblings, and we had to pay for half of our college. I went to Miami University in Ohio, and at the time, in-state was only $4,000. Makes me feel like a dinosaur, but we had to come up with our $2,000 to give my dad every summer. And this particular summer, I was a pool manager. It's funny, my association with water and pools, but I was still on the clock. I would punch in every day, and it had been a very rainy summer. So I'd get to work. It was a country club. They'd close the pool. I'd come home. I'd get to work. So came July, I said to my dad, I said, Dad, they keep closing the pool. I'm not sure I'm going to have my money. And he said, well, you don't have your money. You're not going back to school. It was just plain and simple. So I was like, okay, well, the sun came back out. I worked at the pool from 9 to 5, and I picked up a job at Pizza Hut from like 6 till close, 2 in the morning for the rest of the summer. So I changed in the country club employee locker room, put on my brown polyester Pizza Hut uniform. And for the rest of the summer, I worked literally from like 9 in the morning till 2 o'clock in the morning to come up with my $2,000, which I handed my dad, and went back to, I think, my senior year in college at that point. So I'm going to give him credit for that kind of toughness. What do you do when faced with a challenge, or it seems like you're not going to be able to accomplish something? So
awesome. So in a sense, we could say that you were given controlled adversity growing up, in the sense of here's a challenge that you've got, and I'm going to make sure, your dad might have said this, I'm going to make sure that you figure it out. I'm not going to make
Yeah.
it easy for you. I am going to give you small doses of adversity in the sense. And
Yeah.
yes, you're having a hard time, the pool closed. You're going to have to figure out another way. So
Yep.
that's very interesting. It taught you, in a sense, to change that mindset. Now, I'm going to bring us back to the present, right? Do you still do in-person classes? Is that part of your business's mix?
I have a mixed business, right? So I'm Chicago based. So we have Chicagoland classes. We're in just a couple of pools in the winter months, and then we expand tremendously in the summer to all the outdoor pools. So I have that. I've got 9 instructors that teach our group classes here in Chicago. And then we have the H2Go, which is the app-based do-it-yourself product.
Okay. So I would imagine that under the current circumstances with COVID-19, there are some changes, correct?
Yep, lots.
And both to your standard business, well, not your standard, but your in-person business,
Mm-hmm.
as well as to the product, because I am assuming that a lot of people that buy this product use it in pools across the country, right? They go to their gym and so on. Some people will use it in their own, but many do use it as a product that they would maybe take with them to the gym and have their workout.
Correct.
Now, what are you doing to kind of keep that mindset, remain positive, and also plan for after COVID?
Yeah, so it's a real interesting time for us. Obviously, all of our group classes have been canceled, and that's a bummer for a lot of reasons. That's actually a lot of my income, obviously, and I have all these instructors that are not teaching classes. So, and who knows? Who knows? Keep hoping we're going to hear news that it's going to be sooner than later. So that's that right now. So what's interesting and surprising is the amount of orders that are actually coming in for our do-it-yourself product. They're 99% right now, well, 95% are coming from Florida. And we have always said when we created this product, we looked at the number of pools. You think a lot of people don't have pools. A lot of people don't, but a lot of people do. I think we found some statistics. There's 1 million pools in the state of Florida alone. That's a good thing. Our orders are actually higher now than they've been, which we're pretty happy about that. So we're directing all of our ads and Facebook and things like that in that area.
How are you keeping your mindset forward? One of it, if I'm understanding and hearing correctly, is hope. So you're remaining hopeful that they will open up and everything will be better. You're also looking into other options, such as can we, target people that have pools and are going to be home right now. You're also here with me, which means you're also doing some work on PR, reaching out, creating more awareness for your product and for yourself, growing your own audience. I would imagine those are things that you're doing.
Yes.
So a part of it is basically my question to you is, how are you handling this moment? And how are you planning for the moment after? How are you keeping your eye, same as you did with the marathon, right? You've done this before. You've been through adversity before. You had an injury, you built a business out of the injury.
Yeah. My mother used to have a sign, make lemonade out of lemons. So I tend to be a positive person. I tend not to let things get me down. Just really trying to focus on the positive. I'm trying to, in terms of like my instructors, the group class, that part of the business, just trying to stay connected and keeping everyone motivated and just kind of trying to do nice things and sending some nice thoughts and cards and just keeping everyone happy right now and feeling that they're connected and that they're important. Really trying to, pay attention to what's happening and where the business is coming from, and just focusing on what's working.
You've been awesome. Thank you so much. It's definitely been a pleasure.